In the immortalized words of everything that has ever lived, is currently living, or will ever live, aging is undefeated in the parking lot. From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me. I crave the strength and certainty of steel. I aspire to the purity of the blessed machine. Basically, our flesh will decay and fail us at some point, and it totally sucks. But that rounds us around to today's topic, healing and aging. In the events of Logan, Wolverine, while possessing the healing ability that he has, is aging like milk. And you may disagree, but you're kind of a huge nerd if you do. Aging faster than what could be considered normal, it is assumed his adamantium skeleton is poisoning him, causing his body to have to really contend with these issues. However, according to the Hayflick limit, this does not truly appear to be what's going on. So in today's episode, let's discuss the healing factor that appears to be burning out, the genetics behind it, and a regular human's ability to heal from wounds, and what actually is causing Logan to age in today's episode. But before getting started, I want to say thank you for the support on the channel as always. You guys are absolute ballers and greatly appreciated. If you want to suggest something to cover in the future, check out my Discord, links in the description. We kind of do like these movie night things once a month where we'll just kind of watch something together. Also, started posting playthroughs on Roanoke Games channel, and we'll continue to do so in the future, so come check that out if you are inclined. Otherwise, if you enjoy this, please feel free to like and subscribe. It gets it out there. If you want more content like this in the future, considering this is also like the first time I've ever really covered a superhero. So we kick off our story with this being Marvel. First time I've ever done anything like this, so I'm assuming I'm totally boned on copyright. Thanks for watching. Wolverine, looking a little worse for wear, wakes up and exits his car to find a bunch of dudes stealing his tires, and at least trying to, or because they kind of suck at it, as they fire a shot into his chest. Obviously, it's Wolverine, so he stands back up, pulling his claws out. See, this is why you don't drink and fight. Much like the smash hit World of Warcraft, it makes you think every level around you is lower than it actually is, but my god, do they hit like a dump truck. Be the Chad that you know you can be. Roll Prot Paladin. So while Wolverine is in fact able to heal, just like a Prot Paladin, that looks incredibly painful as he starts getting jumped. Becoming Mr. Furious, he then starts going absolutely ham, not taking everyone out. Remember, crime doesn't pay. Dropping the car off the jack stands, he then heads out to go find somewhere else to sleep. Bro, Cascade Mountains, small cabin in the middle of nowhere is pretty classic, although I'm pretty sure he's already tried this. The timeline for Wolverine is absolutely mind-bending. So, what are you doing in the middle of a desert in Texas? Pushing the bullets out, it's now 2029, and Wolverine's job is to drive people around as a limo driver, a drunk limo driver. So that's probably pretty good. As he takes some of the clients to the graveyard, a woman then calls out to him about helping her. But he leaves as she's a little distraught over it. She leaves the cemetery as a girl looks out the back window at him. Heading to the hospital next, he's being watched by Mr. Edge in the car, which he's not edging in the car, he's just Mr. Edge, who has his windshield wipers on with no rain. Getting in the limo, he now indicates that he knew he was there. He then asks if Gabriella has found him yet, as he's trying to find her and what she took. Handing him a card, he then gets out of the car. Heading to Mexico, Wolverine is trying to get out of there as he coughs, indicating, healing powers may be dropping out. Pulling up to a fence, the cough is getting worse. Very interesting. A cough would indicate that there is some sort of inflammation or damage to the lungs themselves. Given that he did just take several rounds to the chest, I'm going to have to assume his lungs are having difficulty healing, even though his skin continues to do so. This wound appears to have been permanent based on what we will see later. Rolling up to the building, he's then watched by someone. The pale guy then tries to tell Wolverine that Professor X is reading minds, which arguably isn't great as he has dementia. Heading to his room, he's talking about Miss Muppet, also not a good sign. So here we have an aging mutant with dementia who reads minds and can affect their firing. Horrific combination. Surely, this can't possibly go over like a wet fart in church. Professor X then stops Wolverine from making him fall asleep as he now turns into X gonna give it to you and starts putting out a brain blast affecting everyone around him. Logan then puts him to sleep so that finally stops. Man, that would be annoying, not able to control your powers. Essentially, it's the same thing as not being able to control your bladder as you get older. That's right. Any of us who make it to our 80s and 90s, it's coming for you, it's coming for me. There is no dignity in aging. So this brings Professor X back around as he remembers Logan now as he takes his pills to stop his seizures. Professor X then tells him that the albino is a new speciation of mutant and there are forces coming after him. There have been no mutants born in like the last 25 years, so they are the last. Professor X then calls Logan a disappointment, classic, as Logan is called out for waiting for the Professor X to basically die. So I have an idea that might be relatively divisive. It might not be, as I don't know, I've yet to try my hand at the superhero stuff, so maybe you already know this and it is what it is. But I seriously doubt it's the adamantium affecting Wolverine. So let's look at some context clues as to what's happening to him as well as everyone else. First things first, I'm a realist. Wolverine has contended with skeletal changes for quite some time now. According to when this was bestowed upon him, it was indicated that this coating was actually non-reactive. Being that it is the case, you have to ask yourself, how exactly does this all of a sudden now start causing him issues? I believe it's not. Sure, there could be a breakdown of the material over time given all the damage that he's incurred, but this stuff is basically unbreakable unless he's actually domed by an adamantium projectile, so it sort of rules out the body breaking down this material. Along with this, it's a covering of this material, and his bones internally appear to be operating quite standardly to produce blood. Now, it should be noted, however, that this covering applied would appear to take out any other person, as it requires you to have the healing ability that Wolverine has in order to survive. But next, you also have to ask what genetically would be changed causing this healing to fail. Why is he aging now? And this is basically how I see this. His skeleton, even if it did cause problems or it was known, like a known issue that it required a healing factor to contend with, why all of a sudden would this cause a problem? And this is because the healing factor itself was wearing out, not because the adamantium was causing the healing factor to wear out, which we'll kind of get into that when we discuss the genetics of Wolverine and how he was impacted. So, sitting in his room, pulling on his claws, not what it sounds like, he appears to have issues as he is in fact aging as mentioned previously. So he drinks and then hits the hay, definitely the worst way to get some good sleep. So far, mega depressing movie. Assumedly later that night, Albino Man says that there are things he needs to discuss with Logan. These are actually really pressing issues as the seizure medication is too low of a dose. Logan has got money put away to get a boat, and Albino Man found the adamantium bullet. He brings up how Logan's wounds aren't healing anymore and how he couldn't read the medication because it's really just ibuprofen. Accompanied with the standard aging, as with all of us, eyesight is getting worse. In fact, as with all of us it gets worse, it's sort of the standard for all things that exist. Presbyopia, glaucoma, dry eyes, cataracts, and age-related macular degeneration are all the standard, as it's simply because all cells are replaced, their internal genetics have been damaged through time, which let's sort of set the stage as why this actually is and will help to explain what we were seeing later. Cellular mitosis is the reason we survive as long as we do. Well, that and our metabolism not being crazy fast. Take something like a shrew, for instance. They live about 2 years as their metabolisms are extremely quick, which causes their cells to divide faster. An elephant, having a slower metabolism, will live about 70 years, with their cells dividing much slower. And the reason is there is a limit to how much our cells can actually divide, and this is known as the Hayflick limit. For specifically humans, this is around 52 times, with a range that's generally accepted to be about 40 to 60 times, depending on genetic damage. Our cells are very good at dividing, having roughly the ability to divide about 6 feet long of DNA, or approximately 3 billion base pairs with 30,000 genes at 99.99% accuracy. But therein lies the issue: it's not 100% accurate. Because of this, as the genes are replicated and division of the cell continues, damage continues to build up from either the environment forcing changes in the genetic coding or simply errors caused during the replication process. Over time, at about 52 divisions, these damages have accrued enough to the point that it will cause a cell to undergo apoptosis, ending its line as it's no longer functional. And this stems from the fact that genes are no longer directing the cell effectively. This can also result in cancers, and if you've lived a hard life and these cells are put under constant strain to divide, this can lead to aging faster than normal due to genetic damage. But it all happens the same regardless, and a lot of this is because of a little thing called telomeres. Telomeres are what is affectionately known as junk DNA, although it's definitely not junk. While not containing active genes within them, they are instead highly repeated DNA sequences and specific binding proteins that form structures at the end of your genetic coding. But why exactly is this important? Well, every time your cell undergoes mitosis, just a little bit more of that telomere gets cut off, like burning a candle. Eventually, as you get older, these telomeres are cut to the point that important genes and genetic information start getting cut off too. And this is where the issues begin to build up as more and more genetic information is lost at the end of your DNA. Now, isn't it odd, just totally crap, how our cells naturally have a clock built in them to take us out? The reality is, if our telomeres could be repaired or even added to, our lifespans would increase dramatically. We would not be immortal as other genetic damage would build up causing problems, but we would likely live a lot longer than we do now. It is known centurions appear to have a more resilient telomere, allowing for longer lifespans than someone who just drops at 70. And this goes back to potentially certain enzymes or coenzymes known as, and this is a mouthful, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, basically NAD+, to to be present in high amounts in the cells, affecting energy metabolism, possibly preventing a cell from dividing too soon, breaking down telomeres. But it also rounds back to just simply the telomeres being cut into less during replication. Again, it's total crap that our telomeres check out so early, and when you start getting into like the philosophical questioning of how our cells have programmed death through the very thing that keeps us alive, how is this somehow beneficial to the organism? Like, biologically speaking, would it not be better to keep the organism alive indefinitely to spread its genes? Why are there immortal lobsters but not immortal humans? Wouldn't that make us more successful? Anyways, it's definitely a load of crap that we check out after 80 years, but hey, that's the name of the game. Anyhow, I believe these telomeres play a critical role not only in why Wolverine is experiencing the issues he is now, but also why he's aging as fast as he is, and we will get into that later as to what the catalyst is. So, heading into work, he's taking some bridesmaids out. Juxtaposition. Getting a call is from the woman from earlier, and it seems the youngling is outside. Gabriella says that the men are after them as she offers $50K for him to go to Canada. As a window breaks, the woman then falls down bleeding. Taking her to her room, she's a nurse as he sees the Wolverine comic. He goes to leave as then she hands him $20K, so that's enough to pique his interest. So basically, go to North Dakota, get $50K, scoop Professor X on the boat, and be allegedly safe. I mean, it sounds like a pretty good plan. Heading back to the motel, there is no way Gabriella is still alive. The door is broken and she is found essentially donezo in the chair. Totally called it. He looks for the money, but then finds her phone and realizes that she was taken out while texting. Returning to the hideout, Albino Man asks if something went wrong, as he's back too soon, as then he sniffs a ball in his bag, which sounds bad. Anyways, looking out, the truck approaches as the guy from earlier comes out. He's there for the youngling. He then immediately is knocked out by the girl named Laura, who throws a pipe. Professor X then starts talking to her as he says he's waiting for her. She then grabs her bag and then walks off angrily. Flipping over the guy, he then works for a company known as Transigen, as Logan then tells Albino Man to go dump him and then hands him the handheld. Back inside, Logan tries to grab the bag away from the girl, but she's like mega strong. Professor X then says Gabriella is not her mother. Logan asks what her gift even is, because he thinks she's not a mutant. And how can you tell that, bro? Meanwhile, during the transport, Albino Man drops the bounty hunter off as his whole squad now approaches. Seeing the line of vehicles coming towards him, Logan grabs Professor X and wheels him outside to the car as he says he has to go back for the youngling. But Logan really isn't interested in helping her. Attempting to nope out of there, he is blocked by several Dodge Rams. Probably not an ideal situation. So they're there looking for the youngling. Metal Hand the Man then approaches as Logan gets out of the car ready to fight. He asks where Caliban is as he's subdued. They sent in Brock Lesnar to go get the youngling as she watches them approach. And as he approaches, she kind of keeps eating her cereal. Hearing screaming and fighting, she comes out holding something. Oh no, it's Brock's head. Iron Hand then tells her to kind of just stay there as she keeps walking forward. They seem freaked out as then she starts attacking. And she's got claws too. She can heal just like Wolverine. Moving into the building, she then starts wrecking face and cutting femoral arteries wherever they may be. She eventually gets grabbed as one guy subdues her for a second before being stabbed as she gets harpooned. Player 2 now enters the game as Logan joins the fray, as it now appears at will she can have just blades exit her body. They start going after Professor X as Logan takes them out. Logan then goes to get out of there as he picks her up as they go to escape. Jumping on the heavy, Iron Hand then gives chase as Logan hits the fence, but it gets kind of stuck. Man, you'd think a rusted out fence would be easy enough to get through, but of course it's a Chrysler, so I'm surprised this thing even started up in the first place, let alone having the ability to drive into a fence. Backing up out of there, Logan goes for the other exit, chased by bikes. Racing the train, the Chrysler then throws a rod through the engine block, just as nature intended. Okay, maybe not, but still, like a Chrysler? Bruh. Anyways, the youngling then starts stabbing faces again, nice, as he gets around the train before they can attack, and now would be a very good time to leave. I mean, that train buys you maybe 4 minutes, don't just look at them. Caliban is now requested as he can track mutants. Driving along, Logan asks who she is. Oh no, that one night in Cabo has come back to haunt him. It was only a matter of time, really. Meanwhile, back at the never leave a teammate behind outpost, questioning Caliban by punching him, he reminds him how he used to round up mutants. Still never understood why the idea of like how mutants existing was a bad thing. Like, they're mostly just chilling. Caliban then says he's not going to help as Iron Hand then forces him into the light, which burns, which looks painful. So, checking Gabriella's phone, she has footage of them creating the mutants. The offspring were born in Transigen, as the genes were taken from other mutants and added to the normies to create a line of other mutants. I'm guessing for military purposes, which is then confirmed basically seconds after I wrote that. I knew it. So with the youngling, they did a similar thing as they did to Logan. Professor X then says he took Gabriella's money and that Laura is Logan's daughter. Heading to the bathroom, Professor X has to pee as Laura just straight up starts stealing. Well, sort of. Technically, she hasn't left the store yet. The shop worker then approaches her saying, hey, you have to pay for that stuff, as he gets grabbed as Logan stops her from basically ending this man's whole career. Grabbing a phone charger and a cigar, he then nopes out of there, so basically stealing. Getting some sleep later, it took forever for that phone to start charging. Watching the surgery of Laura and her time in her cell, she would cut herself as they became more difficult to control as some of the younglings took themselves out. The facility was working on something that was more successful, so they just started dropping the younglings in their cell, like, okay. So the program was basically shutting down. The nurses released the younglings to save as many as they could. Gabriella was left with Laura, and this is the last message video. Heading north, we're on a road trip. The plan is to go a few hours, get a new ride, and some new clothes. Arriving in Oklahoma, it's truly a hell on earth. Heading into the casino area, Laura immediately gets pulled in by some mannequins as they get their clothes for the group. Pushing all the buttons in the elevator, which we all did at that age, they then head up to their room. Coughing due to his GERD, probably caused by drinking too much, Professor X actually hasn't had a seizure in a while. Maybe he was just bored. In the other room, Logan then checks the Transigen files as he comes across Laura as the source of the DNA is from James Howlett, which, as we all know, is Wolverine. Going through her bag, she's got the X-Men comics, and the fourth wall is breaking. Logan then comes in, ruining her hopes and dreams about the comics. Logan leaves as the other group then pulls up to the gas station, like, completely on one another's tails. Like, there is no reason to be driving like this. So, locking the gas station, they bring Caliban to his cage as he's been tracking. Logan now heads to an overpass to drop his car off to some randoms as he goes and buys another car before heading to the bar with his comics. Looking at the old squad, he then finds coordinates out in the open that match the ones written on the envelope with the money. Truly, I'd rather be in Humansville, Missouri. Heading back to the hotel and still coughing, you gotta get that GERD checked out, brother. He then walks up to the hotel and he sees the squad is already there. Luckily, they sort of suck at their job. While that's happening, Charles starts having a seizure, which freezes everyone up as Logan boards the struggle bus up to the hotel room. Good thing it happened too, as the bounty hunters were already there on them about to drop everyone. Heading inside, he then finds Professor X surrounded as he starts taking out all the mercenaries while they're stuck in place. And that has really gotta suck. It's like a sleep paralysis demon that can actually legit put a blade through your head. The seizures then start getting stronger as he's able to inject Professor X, releasing everyone from their brain-melting seizure. Heading outside, that's like a tonic-clonic seizure, by the way. Heading outside, a lot of people are on the struggle bus as well as they steal a truck and get out of there. Driving along, Laura then plays with the door locks as Logan asks how long was it since Professor X took his medication. I really don't know why he's sitting against the door like this, rather than just sitting in the seat regularly, but continuing to argue like two old men, Logan suggests the whole Eden place was made up because of the comic books. He found the coordinates to Humansville, Missouri, after all. And that's actually, like, no, it's a real place. I'm not joking. There's a place in Missouri called Humansville, Missouri, and I'm calling it right now. It's populated by nothing but aliens. So Dr. Price now makes the scene yelling at old Iron Hand as Caliban watches. Price then heads into the truck as apparently now we have auto trucks in 2029. Sure. Professor X then talks about how the foot claws are because of her sex as they are used defensively because female lions have them and everyone knows humans and lions are notoriously the same, you see. The auto trucks at this point start going maximum overdrive, running over them and a farmer off the road. Logan then drives over to help them get their horses as Professor X calms their minds so he could round them back up. Pushing their truck, they're able to get back on the road as Laura creeps on the horses. Accepting the meal offer reluctantly, they then head to the house. Dr. Price, also known as Xander, says Caliban has been delaying information as Xander says he can help them if he just gives them the information quicker. He asks about what issue Professor X has. I mean, you guys just felt that giant seizure, so you should know. Over at the farm, they then begin eating dinner with the family in a room with zero lighting. It's sort of like a horror movie, like there's never enough lighting. Laura consumes the food as they cannot get their story straight as to where they're from. Nicely done. They talk about the school Professor X ran, as outside the horses are neighing because the convoy is in the distance. Getting up to leave, the nearest motel is around 2 hours away, but Professor X says he wants to stay there, so Logan relents and agrees to stay. In the bathroom, Professor X agrees that they need to take the boat out of there after they deliver the offspring. So then the pump station goes out, and it's about 1.5 miles away. They're gonna go restart it. Logan agrees to go with them. Taking the Professor X upstairs, they talk about how he's going to the pump station and it's dangerous and all this crap, but why exactly? Logan reiterates, again, Eden does not exist. So, headed to the pump station, William then talks about how a company is trying to screw him out of like his farm, and then like the water that's there, which Logan then brings up, maybe the trucks changed lanes on purpose. Walking in the cornfield, you actually need to understand why this part's important. I'm sure those auto-harvesters also won't start attacking at all. So there's something that's rather prevalent throughout the whole movie, and it relates to humanity's struggle right now with obesity, and it's known as corn syrup. While providing calories and making things taste delicious, it is no secret that it is not healthy for your body. But regardless of that, like back to the movie itself, within the X-Men universe, this corn is shown throughout, and the food is mentioned as well, and this is why I believe Logan is not being affected by his adamantium covering. Looking at what's going on, no mutants have been born in 25 years. Along with this, any mutants that are still around are suddenly having issues with their own powers. So what is it? I think it's the corn. Transigen has genetically modified the food to not only suppress mutant genes in those who are born, but any mutant who is currently consuming this modified corn syrup. And now, having those genes suppressed, obviously it's going to cause some problems. In the case of Wolverine, this is a critical issue. Given that his healing ability is being suppressed by the food that he's eating, this presents a rather interesting thought experiment genetically. His healing factor clearly relied on not only his ability to have cells divide rapidly to fill the damage, but also he naturally would be well past the Hayflick limit on his cells, meaning his telomeres would likely be completely gone by now or extremely degraded given his rapid aging beyond what is normal. Because of this, I would suggest it is as follows. Through the years of consuming this food produced by Transigen, his mutant gene was suppressed. Given they wouldn't, know the location of these genes, it being on the X chromosome because of X-Men, this would target this gene functionally and then switch it off. For most, this would clearly make them lose their powers. For Logan, it appears as is normal with life, other genes were actually working in conjunction. While the master gene on the X chromosome was shut off, genes such as the cyclin genes on chromosome 6 would still exist. It appears with Wolverine, the gene which is responsible for mitosis and damage repair would still be somewhat active, more active than normal as with Homo sapiens. As his cells divided rapidly, it seems the X gene containing his mutant power may have had a stabilizing factor on his genes. Functionally, his genetic coding had corrections to the coding done because of this, or at least this is what I'm hypothesizing. However, with this gene silenced, his healing factor led to a rapid buildup of genetic damage causing him to age. It is entirely possible that given he is the age of like 197 in 2029, that his telomeres were completely shot by the time his X gene loci was silenced. Like he literally had no telomeres left and was reliant on the repairs the X gene loci was making to his coding by producing likely a more effective form of DNA polymerase and DNA checking enzymes. Once silenced, all that was left was his standard genetic structure, which was just as susceptible to genetic damage as any other person would have been susceptible to, but with an added issue. Considering his healing factor pushed his body cells to divide rapidly, this would have more than normal genetic damage buildup, which given the few short years this has happened, he would age faster than a normal trajectory. This also means as his genetic structure was damaged, his healing factor would become more and more depleted, not allowing for him to bounce back from wounds he easily could have healed in seconds years prior. Because of all this, if the adamantium skeleton is actually poisoning Logan, then that is just a secondary issue to the healing factor now being defunct due to the genetically modified corn that is silencing the mutant gene on the X chromosome. Seems to me it all comes down to intentionally poisoning the food supply for only mutants. If you, as a regular person, consume this food, you would never even know it was an issue as the food would not affect your ability to function. Given that mutant powers typically come into their own around puberty, I say typically because there's outliers, those who are mutants or would become one would never actually have their powers develop due to this food. I mean, it's all there. No mutants for 25 years, Logan, having issues with healing, Professor X just having seizures. It's all there. But back in the house, Laura then goes into the son's room to look at his stuff. Dude talks about how he got a trophy for second and third place, and I mean, you're still pretty good if you rank. Listening to some music, she likes it. Breaking into the pump station across the field, I guess they're not supposed to be there, as then they just hear water running. Back at the house, Laura then looks at a picture of her and the other mutants in her ward. Well, if you can call it a ward. As Logan and William then work on the pump that is leaking, it's a bit odd, isn't it? William then asks how long his daughter's been mute, and looking out, a truck approaches as William pulls out his handheld, ready to drop some city workers. So a standoff ensues as it wasn't a city worker, it was other farmers who own the land, but an easement agreement was created with the former owner. Logan then grabs the handheld and then breaks it as they get back into their truck and bail out. Logan then starts coughing in as William asks about his training. Back at the house, Professor X stays up as he's probably super bored, and then he tells Logan it was the perfect night. Yo, I'm pretty sure Professor X is about to drop her something. He then says that he did something, unspeakable some would even say. He says he remembers Westchester now and how he hurt people. Homeboy then puts a claw into Professor X's chest and stabs him as his son now also gets stabbed because wrong place, wrong time. The wife comes out as William heads inside as his wife then fires a shot. So she's gone as Logan's evil twin stabs William. Well, what do they call that? Family annihilation? Logan looks at Logan as then he just allows him to walk by like, come on dude, just grab him. And having the reaction time of a snail, he makes the choice to head upstairs and finds the family is done along with Professor X. So now it's a blood vendetta. Price in the van says they struggle with the younglings as you can't nurture rage. Wolverine Part 2 Electric Boogaloo then drops Laura as 2 trucks arrive. It's the farmers. Logan carries out X not gonna give it to you anymore, basically just leaving everyone else to deal with all that nonsense on the other end of the yard. So they pull a force multiplier out on Logan the Second Coming as he starts taking out the farmers. Price tells him to stop as Professor X starts fading. He then flatlines out, seeing as, his aorta was severed, which now sends old Logie here into a rage. Albino Man then grabs some grenades as Laura starts shrieking. Albino Man then blows up the truck and himself as Logan goes after the new variant of himself. No, you're only hurting yourself. So now it becomes a perfectly symmetrical fight as old Logan gets injured several times until William finally pins the new Logan to a thresher before firing several rounds into him, knocking him out for the moment. We know that doesn't work permanently though. William then raises it at Logan, original batch trademark, but he's out of ammo as he falls, officially meeting his end as well. Laura keeps shrieking, she won't shut up as Logan goes to help her, but his healing factor is only slightly better than a regular person's, at least as it looks at this point. Leaving behind the good doctor, he then puts her in the truck. Though this is the perfect time to take out the doctor, so why didn't you? Laura then starts shrieking, seeing Professor X is gone, but it is what it is. Your first lesson in life, none of us make it out alive. Driving through the cornfields, he then lets her out of her binds as he keeps driving. So the next day, the mercenaries then strip the area of any evidence that they were there while the doctor heals Wolverine light. Logan keeps coughing as he drives along, which again, that can't be good, and digging a shallow grave next to a lake. Ah, aging superheroes. Looks painful. Laura then goes and holds Logan's arm as, he's grieving and this is just a lot of fun, but he's overwhelmed by the feels, so he walks away. The Dodge Ram predictably cannot start because it's a Dodge Ram, which then he tries to give it percussive maintenance, but he's actually just upsetting spaghetti over the event. I mean, when he's trying to turn it over, it kind of sounds like a fuel or spark issue, but could be anything really, it's a Dodge Ram. Laura then looks out and sees one guy with his truck as Logan engages in some primal ways to release the pain. It's a classic, sometimes you just gotta break things. So Logan falls and then wakes back up in a doctor's office. The doctor knows he's a mutant, and Wolverine's wounds are not healing as quickly as shown by his stomach. He suggests something in him is poisoning him, which it's not. The doctor then says he can help by running some tests, but Logan tells him to forget that he was even there if he wants to save his own life. So Laura stole that one guy's truck. It's a Bronco, specifically a 1976 Bronco. Now typically you had a Ford, like basically 302 in these things, but sometimes you can get a 351 cubic inch Windsor All-American Muscle V8 engine in these bad boys. They'd sport roughly about 300 horsepower, but some were known to have, like if you had the 302s, it was obviously less. I mean, still arguably a great engine, possibly the best engine Ford ever came up with. 289 ain't bad either. But these things actually made Chevy kick it into high gear when they came out with the Blazers. And I'm telling you, the competition back then was peak. Now everything looks exactly like everything else with just different window placements. Of course, with the 302 engine and the Bronco, I'm also going to go ahead and assume that this is probably just your standard Bronco in the movie, not the 351 Windsor. You'd probably get around like 8 to 10 miles per gallon, which means if Logan was out all day, as we will see, I'm not really sure how she made it as far as she did. She would have had to fuel up pretty consistently, but it's a movie though, and we aren't here to talk logistics, we're here to talk genetics and biology. Logan then thanks the girl for carrying him, and she can actually talk, but she can only speak Spanish, and that actually makes a lot of sense. She's not mute, she hasn't speaking English. Anyways, Logan tries to convey to her that there is nothing up there for her. He says he's not taking her there, as then she punches him in the face. Hell yeah. So he agrees to finally go. The plan worked out perfectly. Heading to Fantasyland, he's now heading up the mountains. So back at the high school gym, there's like a ton of people, including gas station worker guy who appears to have gotten got. They also take Caliban's DNA to make a new tracker, as Iron Hands then works on his hand in the back. As he looks at the back of a photograph with the coordinates on it, like he realizes this is where they must go. What are the odds of that? So back at the truck, Logan is falling asleep at the wheel as Laura offers to drive. Laura tells him that he's dying and that he wants to die. Really lightening up the mood here. Professor X apparently told her this. Falling asleep at the wheel fully, Laura then grabs the wheel and tells him to rest. Jumping into the driver's seat, she now takes off out of there as he's just falling asleep in the car, and it's like fast traveling. Waking up the next morning, bro apparently slept like 14 hours, maybe longer given the fact that it's midday. Exiting the car, well, they crashed. Nice. Actually, they probably just ran out of gas. I mean, again, 8 to 10 miles per gallon. Laura then shouts at him, telling him to come up here, they're on a plateau. So as people watch from the tower, he passes out as then he's platformed to the top. And it appears to be the other mutants that were in her ward. Waking up, they have given him something to make him heal. And we will talk about that later. Yelling in his sleep like a Wolverine, he's having nightmares as he wakes up to Laura watching him like a total creepazoid. Logan then says, "I've hurt people." Oh man, the edge. She then asks about the adamantium around in his pocket, and he says this is what's in both of them. He says that this is probably what could take him out, and he's still considering doing it in the future. But hard disagree. I remember watching the movie where they did dome him with an adamantium bullet, and it did absolutely nothing. He just lost his memory. So anyways, apparently it's used as a reminder of what he is, and now he keeps it in case he needs to check out. Again, it's not gonna work. So you see, it's not all fun and games being a hero. Laura then says she's hurt people, but they were bad people. Logan then goes back to sleep as she takes the round from him as the rest of the younglings also go to sleep. The next morning, a drone is sent out to investigate the seemingly abandoned homestead as the younglings then cut Wolverine's beard to match the comics. He asks how long he's been out, and apparently it's been 2 days. Logan says that they need to leave now and move across the border. This sleep appears to be integral, actually. So sleep deprivation is associated with lower DNA repair gene expression and more breaks in the DNA itself. Typically, this would not have been an issue for Logan, but because of his gene alterations, this has caused his need for sleep to increase dramatically. Prior, it's likely that he didn't need to sleep as his genes would repair regardless, which brings into question, what is this medication doing? Again, this to me clearly shows that this is not an adamantium-like thing hurting him, but something he has consumed. The medication, while short-lived, allows for his body to enter a state of genetic repair, and this would seem to indicate that there is a lot of genetic damage to Logan at this point. And the medication appears to have caused the silenced gene loci on the X chromosome to no longer be silent and allowed to be expressed. A massive repair process would commence, and the cost for the energy reserves would also be immense, necessitating the need for deep sleep at this point. As we will see though, it seems that whatever transigen put in their food sticks around even with the medication activating the gene, and that means once used up, the gene falls silent again. So looking out of the border, they need to get to the woods and then move through there tomorrow night. It's an 8-mile hike out. The youngling then hands Logan the money as he says he doesn't need it. They do. That night, as they sit around a fire, Logan is inside just straight chillin' as he talks to Laura as she walks past, but she's angry. She asks where he will go, and he says he's not what she thinks he is. He's upset because bad stuff happens to people he cares about. So she says, we'll be fine. He's like, ooh, got him. I mean, technically, she's related to you, but she's like, you kind of suck, dude. So waking up the next morning, the building is abandoned as Logan finds a vial that says not all at once. The younglings have left the area as Logan looks down and sees a Bronco and then a bunch of drones flying towards the woods. Looking out, he sees the convoy moving down the road towards the younglings. So beginning his run over to help, man, the guys who have to run next to the convoy, like they got run next to convoy duty, must hate their life. The younglings are now in a dead sprint to try to get away to the border. And I don't think the border is really going to help them that much in a paramilitary operation as they start getting grabbed. Logan, running out of stamina because he skipped cardio day, is having some issues. Using the vial of mystery fluid, he then injects himself as the juice is now loose. Bringing him back to his prime, it's clear the medication saturates his cells, activating all 36 trillion silent X genes, allowing for the full repair of his body, or at least most of it, and healing like he once had. It should be noted though that likely a lot of damaged genetics are still there, since the X gene allowed for genetic damage to not continue at a fast pace. It does not correct gene damage once it's already there. You would basically need like a stem cell template at that point. So the aforementioned repair would be rejoining broken genes and possibly having the polymerase fix issues where it could. So now a fight ensues. One guy gets his arm grabbed and frozen and then broken off. Ouchies. So the mutants start fighting back against some of these guys as Logan arrives now absolutely juiced out of his gourd as he starts slicing and dicing everyone's balls. That's what we came for. The convoy then found the vial, which out of all the places you could have found it, how did you find it? As then they take out the leader youngling. Well, they didn't do that to anyone else, so this guy got totally screwed. Logan keeps running as the convoy then finds them with their sonic whatever it is as they surround Laura. Logan starts his attack as he takes like a ton of rounds in the chest, which must hurt as he continues wrecking face. The medicine is now already wearing off given the initial damage that had to be repaired, and the new damage is pretty much massive as a ton of mitosis is used to heal the wounds that he's sustaining. That crap really isn't that great, is it? Approaching the convoy to free everyone, he tells Laura to go to her friends, as Logan isn't looking so hot as he talks to Iron Hand and Dr. Rice. Dr. Rice, I don't know if I've been saying Price the whole time, but his name is Dr. Rice. Probably have said Price. Starts saying that they don't need to end the mutants, but control them. Considering that for absolutely 0 seconds, Logan then domes Rice, ending the saga as then he goes after Iron Hand. He releases Logan 2.0 as it turns into a fight to the death with Laura approaching a guard. Trying to decapitate him, Laura then starts her attack as he slices the door, stopping the finishing move. Laura then attacks new Logan, but it doesn't go over amazingly well. Iron Hand then harpoons Logan original herbs and spices through the leg as the mutants square up on him. Laura is still going ham with a pig sticker as Iron Hand is then held down by grass. That was his undoing. He's then just completely decimated by mutants. So Team Lee then drops a truck on new Wolverine as old Wolverine tells them to go. So Logan then takes the claws to the shoulder as Laura loads the only round that can take out Wolverine. Hitting him through the chest several times, she then domes new Wolverine through the head, finishing out the problem as she cuts the wood behind him, releasing him. Yeah, that looks pretty bad. He then tells her to take her friends and run. Logan at this point starts flatlining out as his healing factor is, or at least what's left of it, is overtaxed with his genetic damage too high as then he finally dies. The rest of the mutants then roll out and y'all need to steal a truck or something to get out of there. So Laura then quotes the Western she watched about how killing causes you to be branded as then they buried Logan in the woods. Buried next to a pond, just like Professor X. She then takes the cross and puts it as an X, and that was like a super depressing movie. And thus concludes Logan. Given the high amount of genetic damage brought on by mitosis needed to repair himself, I believe the X gene loci causing him to be a mutant in the first place had to be silenced. Relying heavily on gene damage prevention brought on by this gene, it's clear the telomeres would have been burned through rapidly, leading to a faster than normal amount of aging for Logan. This was obviously offset by the X gene. In the end, his meat suit couldn't keep up with the demands and repairs that needed to be done, as he was still superhuman in terms of repairs that he could make, but it came at a heavy price genetically, which was not the standard before. All of this in the end led to Wolverine finally flatlining out and saying, oh, so this is what it's like. Honestly, just let the dude rest. But anyhow, I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think it was actually the adamantium covering that was poisoning him, or do you think it was the food that basically silenced some genes? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed, then leave me a like is greatly appreciated, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Games channel link in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys very much for your support. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Argent Sentinel, Dakota 23, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Trash Panda in a Trench Coat. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, you are greatly appreciated, and you're absolute ballers. Alright, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.